My name is Fatima Ahmed, and I'm a 50-year-old woman living a quiet life in Aberdeen, Scotland. For as long as I can remember, my days have revolved around my family and my faith. I have a husband who supports me, children I adore, and a community that respects me for my devotion to Islam. My life is simple, unassuming, and grounded in routine. Every day starts with prayer, and every decision I make is guided by what I've been taught is the right path. I've always focused on modesty, humility, and staying true to my beliefs. But even with my commitment to faith, there have been moments when small questions linger in the back of my mind. What happens to people who aren't Muslim? Is it fair that they're condemned no matter how good they are? And why are women treated differently, especially when it comes to inheritance or testimony? I never voiced these doubts out loud. They felt almost like a betrayal. Yet the question stayed with me, tucked away in a quiet corner of my heart. One day, my daughter, in her innocent way, asked something that shook me. She wanted to know if her best friend, Chloe, a kind and generous girl who wasn't Muslim, would go to hell. I gave her the answer I thought I knew, that Chloe didn't follow the right religion, but even as I said it, the words felt hollow. That question stuck with me more than I wanted to admit. Then came that morning. It was a sunny spring day, and I was heading to work as usual, thinking about Ramadan. I noticed a truck carrying steel pipes, the straps barely holding them together. Moments later, chaos struck. The pipes came loose, and my life changed forever. When the crash happened, everything went black. I don't remember the exact moment it happened, just the sound of screeching tires, shattering glass, and metal twisting in ways it shouldn't. But then something strange occurred. I wasn't in the car anymore, at least not in the way I expected. I found myself floating above the scene, looking down at what used to be my car, a crumpled mess of metal, glass, and broken dreams. It should have been terrifying to see my own body lying there, limp and lifeless, surrounded by paramedics frantically working to pull me out. But it wasn't. I felt no fear, no pain, no sadness. Instead, there was this strange sense of detachment, as though I were watching someone else's life unravel before me. Time felt different, almost like it had slowed down or stopped entirely. Everything around me, the truck driver pacing with his hands on his head, the murmuring crowd, the flashing ambulance lights, it all seemed muted as though I were watching it through a fogged-up window. Then I noticed it, a light. It wasn't like any light I had ever seen. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but warm and alive. It felt like it was calling to me, not with words, but with something deeper, something I felt in my very soul. The light surrounded me, comforting and gentle, wrapping me in an indescribable peace. I wasn't afraid anymore, just curious. I let myself move closer to the light, feeling burdens I didn't even realize I carried begin to fall away. The worries, doubts, and fears that had been part of me for so long disappeared, leaving only a sense of calm. In that moment, it was as though the world I had known, with all its noise and struggles, faded into the background. The light felt like home, like it had been waiting for me all along. I couldn't explain it, but I knew I was safe. Looking back, I didn't even think about my body on the ground anymore. It felt like it belonged to someone else. Where I was now, in the presence of this light, felt far more real than anything I had ever experienced before. As I moved closer to the light, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, unlike anything I had ever known. The light wasn't just something I could see, it was something I could feel deep in my soul. It was warm and alive, radiating a love so pure and infinite that it brought tears to my eyes. In that moment, I felt lighter, as if every worry, every doubt, and every fear I had carried my entire life was being lifted off me. Then I saw him. At first, it was just a figure in the light, but as I drew closer, I knew exactly who he was. It was Jesus, not the Jesus I had been taught about in Islam. The prophet Isa, a man of wisdom and virtue, but someone far greater. His presence was majestic and radiant, filling the space with an authority and power that left no room for doubt. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think of what to say, but I didn't need to. He didn't use words the way we do. Instead, everything he wanted me to know flowed into me directly, like a wave of understanding washing over my soul. It was as if he spoke to my heart, revealing truths I had never dared to consider. In his presence, I felt completely exposed, as though he could see every part of me, every thought I had ever had, every action I had ever taken, even the things I tried to hide from myself. But instead of feeling judged or ashamed, I felt something entirely unexpected: love. It was a love so profound, so all-encompassing, that it broke me in the best way possible. He showed me my life, not in flashes or scattered memories, but as a complete story. I saw the moments of devotion I had been so proud of, my prayers, my fasting, my efforts to teach others about Islam. But I also saw something I hadn't before: the pride and judgment that had often motivated those actions. I had thought I was being faithful, but I realized I had often looked down on others who didn't share my beliefs. He also showed me the times I had doubted, the quiet moments late at night when I wondered about the fairness of eternal punishment for non-Muslims or questioned the role of women in my faith. I had always pushed those thoughts aside, afraid they might weaken my faith. But in his presence, I saw that those doubts weren't signs of weakness. They were whispers of truth trying to break through. Then came the hardest part. Jesus revealed the spiritual reality behind some of the beliefs I had clung to. He showed me that much of what I thought was divine truth had been distorted. It wasn't easy to accept. I saw moments from the history of Islam with a clarity that made it impossible to ignore the contradictions and human influences I had overlooked before. Through it all, he didn't condemn me. He didn't make me feel foolish or unworthy. Instead, he invited me to see the truth, not just about my faith, but about him. He wasn't just a prophet or a wise teacher. He was the Lord, the source of the light and love that surrounded me. And in that moment, I knew it with every fiber of my being. His love wasn't conditional, tied to rituals or rules. It was free, boundless, and available to everyone. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free, not bound by fear or obligation, but lifted by grace. It was as though I had been searching for him all my life without even realizing it. And now, standing in his presence, everything finally made sense. I wanted to stay there forever, wrapped in his love and light. But I knew there was more to come. This was only the beginning of something far greater than I could have imagined. As I stood in the presence of Jesus, surrounded by the radiant light that seemed alive with love and truth, something incredible began to happen. It was as though he gently peeled back the layers of my life, showing me the world in a way I had never seen before. Without speaking a word, he revealed things I had never dared to question and truths I had never understood. He started with my faith, the foundation of everything I believed and the guiding force in my life. Islam had been my identity, my pride, and my certainty. I had lived it with devotion, prayed with fervor, and followed its teachings with discipline. But in his presence, I began to see things differently. Jesus didn't criticize or condemn. He simply revealed. He showed me moments from the history of my faith, not as I had learned them, but as they truly were. I saw the origins of the Quran, and it was like a veil had been lifted from my eyes. I witnessed the cave where Muhammad received his first revelations, and what I saw was shocking. It wasn't the angel Gabriel, as I had always believed. Instead, there were dark, deceiving forces masquerading as light. They were clever, subtle, and manipulative, twisting truths to create something that appeared divine but was far from it. I saw how these forces played on human fears, ambitions, and weaknesses, shaping a religion that kept its followers bound by rules, rituals, and fear of punishment. It was hard to accept, painful even. My entire life had been built on these teachings, and to see them in this new light was deeply unsettling. But Jesus didn't stop there. He showed me my own life with the same clarity, and what I saw was just as humbling. I had always thought of myself as a faithful servant of God, someone who lived righteously and guided others to the truth. But now I realized how much pride and judgment had been woven into my actions. I saw moments where I had looked down on others, non-Muslims, people who didn't pray or fast as I did, or those who questioned their faith. I had dismissed their kindness, sincerity, and struggles, believing that their lack of belief in Islam made them unworthy in God's eyes. I thought I was being righteous, but now I saw how my pride had blinded me to the goodness in others. Even with my own family, I had unknowingly passed on this judgment. I remembered the times I had told my children that good people who weren't Muslim couldn't go to heaven. I had said it with conviction, but now I saw the confusion and sadness it had caused, especially in my daughter Sophia, who had once asked me about her non-Muslim friend. Jesus didn't show me these things to shame me. There was no anger or condemnation in his gaze, only love and compassion. It was as if he wanted me to see the truth, not to punish me, but to free me from the weight of pride, judgment, and fear that I had carried for so long. He also showed me the spiritual emptiness of some of the rituals I had clung to. My prayers, fasting, and charity work had often been motivated by a desire to prove my worth to God, to my community, and even to myself. They weren't always acts of love or devotion, but attempts to earn favor and avoid punishment. In his presence, I realized how incomplete my understanding of God had been. The love I felt from Jesus wasn't tied to rules or rituals. It was unconditional, boundless, and freely given. It wasn't something I could earn. It was a gift. These revelations were overwhelming, but they were also liberating. For the first time, I saw my life with complete honesty, and instead of despair, I felt hope. Jesus wasn't showing me these things to condemn me, but to lead me towards something greater, toward truth, love, and freedom. As I stood in the presence of Jesus, surrounded by a light so pure and warm that it seemed to embrace every part of me, I felt something shift deep within my soul. His love was overwhelming, unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was not a love tied to duty or earned by good deeds. It was unconditional, boundless, and freely given. And in that moment, I realized I was being invited into something far greater than anything I had known before. Jesus showed me a life that was completely different from the one I had been living. Not a life defined by rules, rituals, and striving to prove my worth, but one rooted in love, freedom, and grace. He didn't speak in words, yet I understood him perfectly. His presence itself was a message, a truth that poured into me in ways that words never could. For so long, I had believed that my value came from how perfectly I followed my faith, how diligently I prayed, how rigorously I fasted, how strictly I raised my children. But Jesus showed me that this wasn't what God desired. God wasn't measuring me by my ability to follow rules. He loved me simply because I was his creation. That love didn't depend on my actions or my worthiness. It just was. He invited me to step into that love, to let go of the burdens I had carried. the fear of punishment, the constant striving for perfection, the pride in thinking I had all the answers. It was as if he was saying, "Come as you are. You don't need to prove anything. You are already loved." As he revealed this truth, I saw glimpses of the life he was offering me. It wasn't about abandoning everything I had known, but about transforming it. Instead of living with fear and judgment, I could live with love and compassion. Instead of teaching my children that God's love was something they had to earn, I could show them that His love was already theirs. I also saw how this truth could free me to love others more fully. For years, I had seen people through the lens of my own faith, dividing the world into believers and non-believers, saved and unsaved. But Jesus showed me that every person was loved by God, no matter who they were or what they believed. He opened my heart to see the beauty and worth in others, not as people to judge or convert, but as people to love. This invitation wasn't just for me, it was for everyone. Jesus made it clear that His love wasn't limited to one group or one religion. It was for all people, everywhere. And in that realization, I felt a profound sense of freedom. I didn't have to carry the weight of trying to convince others to follow my faith. Instead, I could simply share the love and grace I had received, trusting that God would do the rest. As I stood there, overwhelmed by this truth, I felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to have all the answers. I didn't need to know exactly how this would change my life or what steps I needed to take next. All I knew was that I had been shown a truth that was undeniable, and I couldn't turn away from it. Jesus wasn't forcing me to accept this invitation. He was offering it with a gentleness and respect that I couldn't fully understand. The choice was mine to make. But how could I say no to a love so complete, so pure? I knew that if I embraced this truth, it would change everything. It wouldn't be easy. I would have to face questions, doubts, and perhaps even rejection. But I also knew that this love, this freedom was worth it. And as I looked into Jesus' eyes, I knew I wasn't alone. He would be with me every step of the way. When I woke up in the hospital, I was disoriented, my body aching and fragile. Tubes and wires surrounded me, and the beeping of machines was the first sound I registered. Slowly, the events of the accident came flooding back. Those precarious pipes, the screech of tires, and the moment of impact. But what I remembered most vividly wasn't the crash. It was the experience that followed, the light, the love, and the presence of Jesus. I lay there, physically broken, but feeling more whole than I had ever been in my life. The doctors and nurses were amazed I had survived. My injuries were severe, a broken arm, cracked ribs, and countless bruises, but they assured me I would recover. As they spoke, I listened with half an ear, my mind still reeling from what I had experienced. I wasn't the same person I had been before the accident. Lying in that hospital bed, I realized I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at living it differently, authentically, purposefully, and in alignment with the truth I had encountered. I couldn't ignore what had happened. I couldn't brush it aside as a hallucination or a figment of my imagination. It was real. I knew it in my soul. The days in the hospital gave me plenty of time to reflect. I thought about my family, Omar and the kids. How would they react to what I had experienced? Would they understand? Would they reject me? I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I couldn't keep this to myself. What I had seen and felt was too profound, too life-changing to remain hidden. The first conversation I had about my experience was with a nurse named Sarah. She was kind and attentive, always checking in to see how I was doing. One morning, as she adjusted my pillows, she asked me how I was feeling, not just physically, but emotionally. That was all it took for the words to spill out. I told her everything about the accident, the light, and Jesus. Her eyes widened, and she listened intently, her expression shifting from surprise to awe. When I finished, she said softly, "That sounds like a miracle." Hearing her say that gave me courage. I realized that sharing my story wasn't about convincing others. It was about being honest and open about what I had experienced. It wasn't my job to make people believe. It was my job to speak the truth and let God handle the rest. When I finally went home, it felt like I was stepping into a new world. The familiar walls of my house seemed different, as if they no longer fit the person I had become. Omar and the kids were overjoyed to have me back, but I could sense their worry. They tiptoed around me, unsure how to act. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, I decided it was time. I told them about the accident and what had happened afterward. I tried to keep my words simple, focusing on the love and peace I had felt in Jesus' presence. The kids listened quietly, their faces a mix of curiosity and confusion. Omar was harder to read. He didn't say much, but I could see the questions in his eyes. In the days that followed, there were difficult conversations and moments of tension. But there were also moments of grace, like when Sophia hugged me tightly and said, "I'm glad you're okay, Mama," or when Amir asked me if he could hear more about Jesus. Slowly, I began to see how my experience was planting seeds, not just in me, but in my family. Now, as I continue this journey, I feel a renewed sense of purpose. I don't have all the answers, and I don't know what the future holds. But I do know this: I was shown a truth that changed everything for me, and I can't keep it to myself. Whether it's through conversations with friends, moments of kindness to strangers, or simply the way I live my life, I want to share the love and grace I experienced. Every day is a step forward, a chance to live authentically and fearlessly in the light of what I now know. My body may still be healing, but my spirit feels stronger than ever. I'm no longer afraid of the questions or the doubts. I'm ready to embrace this new chapter wherever it leads.